Thanks for tuning into the Zelos Podcast, the show that's all about the pros behind the pros in sports. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder, and this week, Baker Cronin is my guest. He is the performance coach for the Colorado Rapids. That's right, the MLS team. But before we get underway, just make sure you can check out my website, rockysnyder.com. We've got podcast archives going back years. We've got hundreds, literally, of all these pros in the sports section. So just make sure you check that out. Also, we got continuing education courses, in-person and online, blogs, and a whole bunch more. Before we get underway, we just want to acknowledge our important sponsors and then enjoy the show. This episode of the Zelos Podcast is sponsored by Kinetic IQ, where intelligence meets motion. Kinetic IQ brings a biomechanics lab into the palm of your hand, letting you measure movement anytime, anywhere, with just an iPad or an iPhone, and no wearables required. I've been using Kinetic IQ's markerless motion capture in my own practice, and whether you're screening athletes, analyzing posture and gait mechanics, optimizing performance, or guiding return to play, it helps practitioners like us save time, capture more objective data, and make instant actionable decisions. So to learn more about how Kinetic IQ is shaping the future of intelligent movement, visit them at kinetikiq.com. That's KINETIKIQ.com. You know, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have Metabolic Elite be one of the sponsors of the Zelos Podcast. You know what makes Metabolic Elite different is their commitment to real results. I've seen a lot of supplements and performance enhancement things over the years, but they pair clinical experience with innovation, like Lipitab, their proprietary solid-state liposomal delivery system. It's a chewable format which enhances absorption, like nutrients like BPC 157 and synapses. They're delivered more efficiently in the body, supporting recovery, focus, cognitive health. Their formulas go beyond the basics, solving performance health challenges at the system level. Every product is tested for quality, it's backed by research, it's trusted by athletes and clinicians alike. So learn more at metabolicelite.co. And you can get 10% off all of Metabolic Elite products by entering the coupon code ZELOS, Z-E-L-O-S. And before we get underway, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder, S-N-Y-D-E-R. Click subscribe, give us some comments, tell a few friends, enjoy the show. Well, it wasn't too long ago, just a few weeks ago, I had somebody from the Colorado Rapids on, and as luck would have it, I get connected to somebody else in the organization, Baker Cronin. He's with me this week. He is basically the S&C coach with Colorado Rapids. They've got a whole bunch of things brewing up for the upcoming season. So now it's not even preseason yet. It's kind of off season. So fortunately, I'm grateful that you can spend a little time and have this conversation with me, Baker. So welcome to the Zelos Podcast.
Yeah, thanks. Glad to be here, Rocky. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, now, before we get underway and go into the nitty gritty of like coaching changes and what it's like to be in an organization like that, your role with the Rapids and so on, we've got a lot of mutual friends. I think we've probably got more than we realize, but you have a background in other teams in the MLS, and one of them, my favorite here, my hometown team, is the Quakes. But what's your career path? Give me the laydown of from whether it's high school and college on or just after college, wherever you want to begin.
Yeah, I think like most people in this realm, sports was always a part of my life growing up. Was a pretty competitive soccer player growing up, a lot of club tournaments, and unlike a lot of other people, I didn't have that big injury or big setback that put me out. But I had a choice to make as I was heading to college, which was go to a bigger D1 university and focus more on academics, or pursue some opportunities at a smaller school and get to play soccer still. And I ended up opting to do the former and go to University of Michigan to pursue my academic career, but kept playing club soccer as I was there. And while I was there, I just got into kinesiology and, you know, broad topic kinesiology. Kind of eventually you have to pick what's your path going to be. Is it going to be a more strength and conditioning focus? Is it going to be a sport management focus? And then for me, the athletic training pre PT focus ended up being what really struck me as interesting, and getting to combine the knowledge of how the body works and also how injury works, and learning about that whole from injury to return to play just seems so fascinating to me because you see it with athletes so much. You know, it's such an inflection point in so many athletes' careers when you ask them about it. And to be able to be a part of that process and support them through that just seemed like something I'd be so interested in. So I ended up getting my athletic training degree from University of Michigan. Went on to Oregon State University to get a master's
Go
in
Beavers.
Go Beavers is right, in neuromechanics, and got to dip my hand into some research, which was really, really interesting and broadened my knowledge, particularly into motor control and biomechanics, which I thought was great. And from there, that's how I ended up in the Bay Area. I took an opportunity with Cal Berkeley, and about 6 months into that, the staff at San Jose Earthquakes reached out and asked, "Hey, we're looking to add an athletic trainer to our staff. Would you be interested in applying?" And the idea of being back into soccer, particularly professional soccer, seemed like too good of an opportunity to pass up. So I jumped at the opportunity and joined the Quakes 2016, and for the next
2016.
about
Okay, when it was still a
2016.
Via.
Oh yeah,
Excellent.
Avaya Stadium back before the company may have gone bankrupt.
Dude, you know when they built Avaya Stadium? For those that don't know, it's right beside Mineta Airport, San Jose International Airport. And you're thinking, like, that's going to be the loudest freaking arena. But when you go to games, it's like you don't even know there's an airport right beside you. You don't hear it's partly because of the fans, but also, I don't know, the acoustics, they figured it out. I love going to Avaya slash PayPal, as it's called
PayPal.
now, but one of the greatest MLS stadiums as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and just an amazing sunset for all the
Oh,
evening games. The sun going down over the hills in the background is pretty unbelievable.
okay.
Um,
So, what was your capstone? I'm curious. You said neuromechanics, so that piques my interest. What was your thesis, your master's about? Like, what was your final?
yeah, so my thesis was on the relationship between hip rate of force development, so primarily glute med and glute max, rate of force development, and jump cut biomechanics in female athletes. So the broad picture of the idea was, you know, if we see a relationship between this hip musculature and particularly knee or hip internal rotation, dynamic valgus during a jump cut, is there a better way we can train these athletes focusing more on rapid force development as opposed to just pure strength slash peak force development?
And
And we did find a relationship between particularly the hip extensor group or your glute max, and jump cut biomechanics. So really focusing on rapid force development within your glute max can have a potential positive relationship between that and decreasing dynamic valgus during a jump cut.
did you divide the population of female athletes into those that presented with a greater degree of valgus, varus, or neutrality in terms of knee position?
Nope. So we didn't discriminate on the amount of dynamic valgus we had. It was basically just saying like, would the relationship show that those with greater rate of force development, when we tested them via the Biodex and EMG, would that then correlate to having less dynamic valgus when doing the jump cut? And we did see a relationship there.
Oh, right on. Oh, very cool. Now you say we. How many cohorts were doing this with you?
So this was myself and the fellow master student, and then we had our two advisors and one PhD student who was using some of that research into their huge dissertation, along with a couple other projects they're working on.
Did that become peer-reviewed publication?
Yes, sir.
Right on. Where would I find it?
Believe it's in the Orthopedic Journal of Medicine.
Okay, I'll have to look it up. I'll go sport
Yeah.
discus, see what I can find.
Yes, it is in there.
Did you like doing the research from that perspective, or are you done with research and you don't want to do it anymore?
I
I mean, you
actually
do it in
loved
your
it.
job, but I mean like legitimate kind of setting up all of the validity and reliability factors, all those things.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot, but I actually loved it to the point that I had a serious discussion with my advisor at the time about continuing on to a PhD versus continuing out into my career path. And ultimately, the decision came down to what do you want to do long term? Do you want to just do research, or do you want to continue to work clinically and clinical work? One-on-one work with athletes was the number one thing for me, and so he said, you can always come back, but if you kind of pursue this for the next 3 years, you may find that it doesn't improve your job prospects working within a sports team any more than a master's would.
Yeah, it's interesting. The people that I've had, former guests that have DATs, did it more or less for just intellectual pursuits, not for career advancement or anything. Yeah, so it's just it says a lot to be willing to go the distance, I guess.
Yeah,
Because that's a heck of a commitment. Or do you want to commit yourself to another direction, which is sounding like you have totally done exactly that. So you get to the Quakes, and not to diminish the decision that you made. I hope that didn't come out wrong. So you go to the Quakes, and then I know you connect with Adam Parr, Adam, who we've had on twice now when he was with Minnesota, and now he's with Charlotte FC. But it sounds like you guys connected, and then did you go to Minnesota too?
yeah. So we connected there. He started out as the strengthening and conditioning coach for our affiliate team at the time, back when that was a thing in MLS in Reno, Nevada.
What
And
was that team
then
called?
Reno 1868.
All right.
And so we ended up both kind of leaving San Jose for our own reasons. And lo and behold, next step, both ended up in Minnesota. Me working as an athletic trainer, and then obviously him as a strength and conditioning coach, sports scientist. Stayed 2 years there together, and then lo and behold, when Charlotte FC was getting ramped up for their inaugural season, both got reached out to about an opportunity there, and we're both very intrigued about building something from scratch. And lo and behold, there we ended up there as well.
No kidding.
Yeah, so we kind of went the same path for about six years in a row there.
Did you plan that out, or it just happened to be that way?
It just happened to be that way.
That's crazy, Baker. That's wild. Okay, and then Colorado started calling.
Yeah, so I had left Charlotte for some personal reasons, needed to go home, spend some time with family. So I stepped away from professional sports and kind of thought I'd be done in that environment after about 8 years, and was working back in Michigan. And Kyle Porter, who I had briefly run across and we'd done a little work together, called me up and asked about if I'd be interested in an opportunity to kind of transition into more of the strength conditioning / performance side, but specifically in a role that would be focused on the return to play and helping bridge the gap between the medical side and the performance side within our return to play process. And so it seemed like an incredible opportunity. And I was feeling the itch again to get back into the team sport environment. And so, I jumped at the chance, and over a year in, I'm so thankful to be in Colorado.
Right on. Yeah, not to minimize the impact that working in the professional sports level has on individual and relationships within the family, because that's probably all the people I talk to. That's one of the biggest challenges is really having time to, so good for you for taking a little time off and resetting. And but I gotta say, I'm pretty excited to really dive into some conversations with you because I tend to be in that. I think, and I don't know if you'll agree, but I think if there's going to be another certification for strength conditioning, it should be rehab strength conditioning. It should be the one that fits inside of the RTP spectrum because there's this. There's the gray zone there where the baton is being passed over from the athletic trainer, the physical therapist, on to the performance director or strength coach or whoever wants to call whatever title it is. But I won't say it's a gap. We use that word too much. There is there's something there. There's turbulence. That's probably the best way I could describe it. There's turbulence there, and we do your best to try and smooth it out. But there's a lot of moving parts there. So it must be exciting. Like how many athletes are you typically kind of overseeing in that realm of RTP strength conditioning?
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, it's no injured players,
Right.
but we don't always live in that realm. So generally speaking, there's on average, I'd say between 1 to 3 guys who are just like my most intent focus is on them, and it's giving them very detailed longitudinal planning through most steps of the return to play process. Most specifically, like once they're off the table, the athletic trainers feel like they're in a good spot to begin. Some movement, some patterning, some loading in the gym, and then how and when we transition onto the pitch. That's kind of all my purview. And it's great. I love it. And then I'm also spending a good amount of time with our healthy athletes and working on specific programming for them in the hopefully injury reduction space. I like to steer away from the word injury prevention, but
Yeah.
injury reduction, working on maybe small nagging things that they have going on, or they have a history of previous injury, and we're just trying to make sure they're staying robust in something that's individualized and specific to them.
And with the physical demands of soccer slash football, depending on where you're listening from, uh, there's going to be patterns that emerge within the majority of players. First of all, I want to back up before I ask you that question about patterns that you see within your players. Um, I kind of like trying to guess the position of people in the sports that they are in, and midfielder is striking me right now for you. Were you a midi?
I was not.
Damn!
I almost, oh, I very few guys guess it because I'm competent enough in my soccer skill to play with them, but I was a goalkeeper.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, I can't see how tall you are or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just striking me from energy perspective. Okay, there, I'm 0 for 1 there today so far. But let's get into those patterns. If you notice, and what I mean by that is like, do you see, you mentioned valgus knee, but do you see greater degrees of hyperextension through lumbars? You see a greater degree of anterior tilt of the pelvis, or perhaps one side of the pelvis has more anterior tilt and the other one's perhaps posterior, so you see this incongruity. What kind of structural or biomechanical patterns are are common that you see that you're not surprised by?
Yeah, I think an anterior rotated pelvis is not uncommon whatsoever. In that, it's just guys, it's a kicking sport. Guys are kicking a lot, and I think um, there's also you see kind of somewhat of a discrepancy at times in closed chain ankle range motion, dorsiflexion. Um, and, for some guys, I think you see a lack of hip internal rotation. Um, and that a lot of times is an imbalance one side to the other.
Hmm.
What's interesting with a lot of that stuff is how you go about or when you go about addressing it. Because I think within our population, a lot of these guys are 8 to 10 year vets. In soccer's a sport where in most parts of the world, you're generally a professional between 17 and 20 years old. And we got guys, in their mid to late 20s, early 30s. So they've been a professional athlete for a decade to a decade plus. And how much of that do you want to change about them because they've gotten this far in this career and they're being successful? If they don't have a significant injury history or they don't have specific complaints, do you want to change the motor patterns and the biomechanics that have gotten them this far in life? But also, can you start to notice things that, particularly with the aging athlete, that they're starting to maybe break down a little bit? Where areas you can help smooth that transition as they're going from their peak physical condition into more of a later stage professional athlete who needs a little more help getting through the demands and rigors of our sport, which, as I'm sure anyone in this space and most sports can say, is only getting more intense, is only getting faster, and is only having more games per season.
Yeah, it's a kind of a sticky wicket there, right? Where you know that by bringing the body into a more balanced state, there's more resources available for the athlete. And but at the same time, you're concerned with developing new motor patterns, which may lead to a potentially higher likelihood of a non-contact injury, though not quite sure. So and you're dealing with very expensive models, shall we say. So there's this hesitancy, I'm sure, on everyone's part that, hey, if this is working for them, don't try and fix it. And with that, though, there's going to be opportunities where you see something like restricted internal hip rotation, and you say, let's just kind of work with that and have you integrate it back on the pitch, and you give me some feedback during the whether we're doing uh, 3-on-3, 3v3, or we're doing full pitch, or we're just running through some drills out there. How does that feel? I mean, is that kind of the like how do you navigate that? I guess that's my question.
Yeah. I think you kind of hit on it towards the end there. It all starts with um, the relationship to the athlete. I think so much of what we try to do and what I think is really great practice is having a athlete centered approach to programming and care. And that means learning and having a conversation with the athlete, making sure they're involved, particularly in the professional space where, this is their livelihood. And generally speaking, these are people who tend to know their bodies pretty well. Um, have the conversation with them and figure out, hey, this is something I'm seeing. Do you notice symptomology in these ways? Do you notice, hey, I don't recover as well as I used to? I feel a little tighter in certain motions that I don't normally do. I don't feel as fast as I normally do. How can we, me being the clinician and the athlete, find the best path forward for you, but always making sure that they are involved in that discussion and what that process is going to look like and always laying it out in front of them ahead of time because that is one for me how you create buy-in, but two, it's also how I think you get the athlete to their best possible place because they ultimately need to want to make these changes and they also need to feel like these are necessary changes because if an athlete says no, that's not a problem for me, I'm not going to force them into something that's unnecessary to them because all you're going to get is pushback the whole way. And then if anything happens to go wrong, their first thought is, well, you made me change.
We're just going to take a quick pause from this conversation to acknowledge our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. The Zelos Podcast is sponsored by Kinetic IQ, where intelligence meets motion. Kinetic IQ brings a biomechanics lab into the palm of your hand, letting you measure movement anytime, anywhere with just an iPad or iPhone. No wearables required. I've been using Kinetic IQ in my own practice, and whether you're screening athletes, optimizing performance, or guiding return to play, it helps practitioners like us save time, capture more objective data, and make instant actionable decisions. So to learn more about how Kinetic IQ is shaping the future of intelligent movement, visit kinetikiq.com. That's KINETIKIQ.com. At the forefront of metabolic elite is Jim Lavelle, internationally recognized clinical pharmacist, a chief science officer at Lifetime, and the co-chair for the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. He's got over 4 decades of experience and has guided Olympic athletes, professional teams, and leading health institutions. You know what makes Metabolic Elite different is their commitment to real results. Like Lipitab, their proprietary solid-state liposomal delivery system. It's a chewable format which enhances absorption like nutrients like BPC 157 and synapses. They're delivered more efficiently in the body, supporting recovery, focus, cognitive health. Their formulas go beyond the basics, solving performance health challenges at the system level. Every product is tested for quality, it's backed by research, and trusted by athletes and clinicians alike. And you can get 10% off all of Metabolic Elite products by entering the coupon code ZELOS, ZELOS. You've got these players, let's say just a handful of players right now that you're focusing on, and there's a certain model and pathway that you have developed, and within there's programs, say landmarks that you would like to hit to know when to progress and so on. But because we're plastic beings that will adapt to our environment on an ongoing basis, there's going to be days where your players are coming in that they are exceeding and the expectations, and then maybe it's later on that week it just the opposite is occurring. So within the structure of program design that you've set forth for each of these athletes, how do you create the flexibility to adjust to whatever you see kind of on the fly? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. A flexible program is crucial,
Right?
in this space, and I think a lot of that is combining the subjective information we get from the athlete on a day-to-day basis via conversation and any other sort of questionnaire, be it official or unofficial, that we go through with them, and then combining that with the objective information that we collect on the athlete. I throughout our return to play process, we have phases that we're trying to work through in the process. And within that, there are objective criteria that they need to clear to progress phase to phase. And they're specific, obviously, to the athlete, and they're specific to the injury. But within that kind of rigidity we have of like, these are the criteria, we need to be flexible. So talk about our programs are rigidly flexible.
That's
Within that, in that we take real-time feedback and make changes as necessary. If an athlete's ready to push, we push them within the bounds of the phase that they're in. So if we're, on the pitch and they're doing some progressive high intensity running, so we're working up to a set velocity max that we have, and they're feeling great, we may spend more time working on that volume of running towards that high end of that velocity threshold we've set for that time period. If then they come in and they say, oh, I'm a little more sore from that, we're going to say, okay, great. We need to give your body a little more time to adapt to that volume of work. So here's how we're going to scale down today's session to give you the ability to recover and adapt, but also without removing stimulus completely. So we may go out on the pitch and just focus a little bit more on your sport specific skill reacquisition that day. And maybe we focus a little bit more on general aerobic conditioning and less on intensive fitness, whether that's aerobic threshold or into anaerobic work. Um, and then we'll say, all right, let's see where we're at the end of the week. Where does that put us in our progression? Have we cleared the objective criteria we need to clear? Has the athlete feel subjectively completing that volume of work? Are we ready to move to the next step, or do we need to stay at the step we're at? We're never
Mhm.
pushing for the sake of pushing or pushing because the timeline says we have to push. We're always pushing and progressing based on the criteria set out in front of us and the feedback and response of the athlete.
Sure. Great. Well, you being uh, academically trained as an athletic trainer and professionally as well, and going into the strength conditioning part of this whole spectrum as well, I find that like super powerful because the tools you have are beyond my scope of practice. I'm not an athletic trainer. So when it comes to the hands-on uh, assessments, when it comes to a lot of hands-on stuff, that is, I see that being one of your superpowers is to combine the world of athletic training and overlay it into the world of strength conditioning. And so give us an example, if you would, how that occurs in your daily routine with your players. Because I know it does.
Yeah, I think within my role specifically, the biggest part for me is the relationship we have within our staff as well as then with the athlete. And so we have a staff of great athletic trainers where I don't really have to do a bunch of hands-on work or really any hands-on work with our athletes on the table. But I have the benefit of the background of information to know, hey, an athlete comes in reporting this issue. They get seen by the athletic training staff who then are like, well, we did this treatment and this treatment and this treatment. I know, hey, based on what they saw in their evaluation, the treatments they performed, the general response of that athlete should be X. And so I can then take that information, that background knowledge, and go to the athlete and say, hey, I saw you did a lot of kind of deep tissue work today. So you are potentially going to be a touch more sore. We're going to scale back some of maybe the power based work we're going to do or high intensity eccentric work we're going to do. And we're just going to work on maybe some more movement quality because it sounds like you are getting treatment because you're feeling stiff, you're feeling sore, you're feeling tight. I can now maximize the outcome for you for that day based on that information. And I think that's super powerful as well. I think a lot of it comes from just speaking common language. And
Mm,
so having an understanding of what the athletic trainers are looking at, what is the special tests they're probably going to do, like I said before, the treatment modalities they're doing. The conversation I have with the athletic training staff now is has more clarity and is more efficient because we're speaking the same language because we have the same base of knowledge and understanding. And then I can then take that information, bring it into the gym space or onto the pitch and speaking with, our head of performance or sports scientist can then communicate in a way that's more applicable to them. And now I think the efficiency of our communication is better. And then that hopefully is leading to better programming, better outcomes.
sure, I could totally see that. And that's why I think when it comes to physical therapists or athletic trainers that go into the strength conditioning, that go into the weight room, that it's just so much more rich in terms of what they can offer by virtue of their understanding. So compared to those of us that became strength conditioning specialists, and then we're just trying to learn as much as we can on the outside, but it's just not the same. So I just think it's much more comprehensive. So the other thing I'm thinking of, Baker, is like, let's just take anything, whether it's if you're looking at a PCL test, or if you're doing even a Thomas test stretch, or something, some kind of maybe open or closed chain kind of screening or protocol, and that gives you some insight on what loaded exercise pattern it is that okay, we're going to do this, and now let's reassess using that same protocol. That's, I can see that happening. Do you do that much?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we want to always be sure the interventions we're prescribing are getting the outcomes we expect. And, particularly with like whether it's range of motion or, general joint mobility work, we want to make sure, hey, if we're going to program something, we expect you to improve, passive active range of motion or improve um, mobility within the joint. So having control within a bigger range. We're always want to test that because it's reassuring to me to say, hey, what I did was good and I'm not a crazy person, as well as to the athlete to say, hey, like we did this thing. Hey, look at that. You feel better. You're getting a better outcome. And now the next time we talk about, hey, I think you should do this, their buy-in is just a little greater the next time and the next time. And so, particularly, I think within sport where athletes are changing teams, and you see it at the collegiate level now much more, but definitely at the professional level, um, creating a trust quickly with the number of new athletes that you see on a year to year basis is so, so important. And I think, like you're alluding to, it's just such a great way to start creating that buy-in.
Yeah, I think that's the fastest way to do buy-in. And I know it seemed like an obvious answer for anybody listening, but to be honest, I've seen so many professionals in that type of setting who've done an assessment, and then based on the outcome of the assessment itself, they've just selected an exercise that say, we're going to do that, as if it's just the magic thing that they need without coming back and reassessing. So it's almost like they're just going off a protocol, but really the importance of test, move, and reassess or retest to show the efficacy, or to better to the other point is, if I don't get the desired outcome that I'm seeking, then I'm not, I need to find something else. Whether it's a structural or biomechanical issue, that might tell me something. Whether it's a neurological, I mean, it just opens the doors for more understanding and more problem solving. And we just can't make an assumption that just because this person is restricted in this manner, that I'm going to give them this and everything is going to be solved. It could be that they're restricted there for a completely different reason, and whatever you give them is not necessarily going to address the issue. I guess that's kind of what
Yeah,
I'm going to too.
spot
And
on.
you've probably, yeah.
Spot on.
Okay, how about this? How about a little rapid fire right now? I did
Yeah,
this a
let's
couple
do
of
it.
weeks ago, and just had a fun time. So, um, okay, what's one physical quality you prioritize year round in soccer players?
Power.
Nice.
So
How about
speed
the
and power.
speed and power? How about the most overlooked factor in MLS player availability?
That's a good question. I would say constant exposure to high intensity actions, whether it's running or change of direction,
So durability and sustainability, and
by exposing them to those things.
nice. A metric you trust most when deciding to push versus pull back.
The athlete's subjective feeling.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. How about an exercise or method you've changed your mind on since working in the MLS?
That um,
Honesty is a beautiful
no,
thing,
I'm
man.
thinking this is great. This is a really good question. I would say the need to find the right times to push during the season. I think so often the idea is once you get in season, less is more because you feel like you're constantly battling fatigue. But because our season is so long, there are times where more is more. And being able to understand when to push can lead to the best outcomes as you get to the end of your season, particularly in a sport that relies on playoffs.
Wow, great answer on that. Was not what I was expecting. How about this? The biggest challenge young players face when stepping into first team training.
That they are fighting every day for their spot and their salary. And the veterans have no qualms about doing what they need to maintain their spot.
Best recovery tool that doesn't involve technology.
Sleep, nutrition, hydration.
Altitude, advantage or complication, and why?
Advantage because we live at it. And so you live high, even if you live high, train low, we're more adapted than anyone who comes into our environment.
Right on. How about one habit that separates uh, consistently available players from those who aren't? One habit.
The ones who do the work before training and after training that keep them healthy.
And if you could borrow one performance concept from another sport, what would it be?
I think it would be rugby's training and resiliency mentality.
Tell me more.
So in rugby, you tend to see guys are just there's a culture of working hard and working together, and it's just built into the environment, whether it's in the gym or on the pitch. And I think you see these guys who come for the rugby, they're just like, what do I need to do to be better? Is it more? I'll always do more. If it's less, I'll do less. But they're always trying to outwork each other to be better.
Right on. Okay. So uh, that was fabulous. Love the rapid fire. That's really gets you on your toes, doesn't it? Makes you think a little
Yeah,
bit. It's kind of cool.
those are some really good questions too, because, I think you want to answer them quick to stay with that rapid fire mindset, but there's some good thoughtful ones in there. I really liked that.
Right on. Well, I appreciate that. Okay. So the listening audience is probably familiar with, a lot of people think that I'm like the foot guy. And it's kind of a misnomer. I know I do a lot of content. I talk a lot about it. I've got online courses, and I think one of the main reasons why is because it's not talked a lot about. It is the only part of the body that's contacting the pitch as an athlete moves around. And we're so focused on the big joints and getting mobility and patterning, whether it's the shoulders and the hips, and for that matter, we'll throw in the ankles. But we've got 33 joints down in the feet that are supposed to move, and their movement pattern will dictate what's going on at the ankle, the hip, the shoulder, all through the body. And on the reverse side, I know the body will feed movement down into the feet, of course, but there's a huge component there. And earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that there is a trend or a pattern, if you will, that you see limited dorsiflexion. And not to put you on the spot here, Baker, but how much do you look beyond the ankle and down into the foot? Like, is that an area that within your realm, within the bubble that you're in, so to speak, your position, is that something you drive into?
Yeah, so actually, it's funny you mentioned that. We were just talking. So we're preparing for our preseason performance testing that we'll do coming up here, along with our physicals, and talking about doing some range of motion testing with the athletes, and doing close chain dorsiflexion, so driving knee over the toe. And something we talked about is, with that test, should we then add a second part of that test where we either put the great toe into extension and see what role potentially flexor hallucis longus plays in that, or potentially changing the angle of the foot. I think what we see a lot with some of our guys when they come in with ankle problems is their ability to contact the ground through good intrinsic foot control is not always great. A lot of these guys, their feet are essentially, for a lot of them, for all of them, their feet are their careers. They make money because of what they can do with their feet for the most part. And, we get ankle injuries, and I think something we always try to do when we're rehabbing ankle injuries is have a large focus on the foot, particularly how well they have that intrinsic control of the foot. Our athletic training staff actually does a really good job of kind of having a toe yoga protocol to implement with these guys, which I think is massively effective.
Right on. Good. Oh, that's good to hear. I will say, like, I will throw in my uninvited 2 cents into that conversation, which would be if
Please.
you wanted a simple screen in regards to the hallux or the big toe, the great toe, I would just do a windlass mechanism assessment when it comes to lifting the toe off the ground in a dorsiflex position. What angle do they achieve? Ideally, we should see 60 degrees of dorsiflexion, 15 from the first met dipping down into the ground. It's a plantar flexion, while the phalanges pull up 45 degrees. If you see a greater amount than 60, then they are most likely restricted in their ankle and they are not getting as much power out of their hips as they could. And the same may be true for if they don't achieve 60 and they're under that. And they've got like hallux rigidus in a way. If there's lacking dorsiflexion, then they're not going to be able to get into the position to truly drive, and therefore they'll be reducing the optimal amount of power that their hips can achieve. So a really simple test, and you'll probably find that some players will have one toe that one big toe that dorsiflexes greater, and that will show most likely relate to an imbalance within the hips and the ankles themselves. Kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, particularly having once again, specific objective threshold to work within.
Yeah. Yeah. 60 seems to be the magic number for ideal dorsiflexion in regards to gait. Dude, I can't believe I no, I can't believe it. Sometimes I say I can't believe the time's flown by. I can totally agree. I have no doubt this time has flown by because you have gotten me so engrossed in the subject matter, and you've been a great person to chat and talk shop with. I would love to do like volume 2, maybe somewhere, hopefully. Well, before November, maybe halfway through the season or whenever you get a little break. Well, you got World Cup break coming
Cup
up,
break. Oh yeah.
right? So maybe during the World Cup, we'll get together again and see how the first half of the season went and all that, because I'm totally into that. I think that would be great.
Yeah. I would love that. And it's really great hearing your insight and getting some stuff to really provoke thought and discussion, because that's the best part about this profession and talking to colleagues.
I get so much from you guys. I can't thank you enough. And if people want to kind of just follow Baker Cronin and his pursuits through the MLS, obviously I'll put a link for the Colorado Rapids and I'll throw your LinkedIn there. But do you ever post anything on whether it's Instagram or the old guy stuff on Facebook or whatever?
No, I'm not too big on the social media. I haven't quite gotten into the big promotion following
You
stuff,
don't have
but the
like a
LinkedIn
French
the LinkedIn
bulldog
is
or
great for
anything?
me. No, I have a black lab German Shepherd, and she gets most of the play.
There you go. I figured it's always the dog that gets all the play.
Exactly.
Dude, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on, and I look forward to another round of conversation with you.
So, yeah, thank you so much, Rocky. I really appreciate the time.
And that puts this episode to rest. I can't thank Baker enough for coming on, and I appreciate the Colorado Rapids for allowing this to happen. And remember, you can go to my website, rockysnyder.com, to find out more information about the work that I do, continuing education, courses, different speaking engagements, podcast archives, blogs, and a whole bunch more. And before we get you out of here, just one more time, listen to our acknowledged sponsors. Have a great week. Remember to check out metabolicelite.co. Check out all the products they have on their website. Synapsin Pro is something I've been using to help stay focused without having to over-caffeinate myself. It keeps me in the zone so I can just really hone in on the things I need to achieve without feeling like, man, I gotta reach for an energy drink every 5 minutes. metabolicelite.co. And don't forget, Kinetic IQ. They've got markerless motion capture for morons like me. I can use their product with my iPhone or my iPad. I can look at posture analysis, movement analysis of any exercise, gait analysis. It gives me everything I could possibly want when tracking people's movements. So, check out kineticiq.com.